All right, thank you all for coming today. My name is Dana Leeper. I'm with the Maine Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Unit. I've been with the Maine CDC for about 7 years, and I work primarily on lead poisoning prevention. I was a case manager for many years, but now I'm focusing more on the prevention side of things. So today we're going to discuss what to know about lead laws in Maine with the Maine real estate experts, and today is February 17th, 2022. So first, we're going to discuss an overview of lead poisoning in Maine and what lead is, the various sources of lead in the residential environment, why lead poisoning is bad, how are children identified for lead poisoning, how does lead poisoning occur, what are Department of Health and Human Services or Maine CDC lead inspections, what are DHHS ordered to abate lead hazards, and what can your clients do to prevent lead poisoning, as well as what you guys can do to help out too. So in Maine, we have about 300 children per year that are identified for lead poisoning. And down in your areas in York and Cumberland County, between 2016 to 2020, there were about 600 children diagnosed with lead poisoning. Of those in Maine who have lead poisoning, roughly 69% live in rental housing. And of the children with lead poisoning, about 87% live in housing that was built before 1950. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So about 40% of rental units in York and Cumberland counties were built before 1950. And among the cases of lead poisoning that we find, about 79% of those children live in housing where we find lead paint hazards. Any questions?
I'm just wondering how you got a picture of one of our listings, but.
Yes. All right, so lead is a metal that has been used for thousands of years. And I like to say that some people think it was the cause of the decline of the Roman Empire. So the aqueducts were lined with lead. They had lead that was sweetened in their wine. So they use lead quite a lot, and lead plays no role in the human body. Researchers have not identified a safe amount of lead in the human body, and lead poisoning still remains a top environmental threat to young children. Any questions? No. So these are some pictures of melted lead. Also, lead used to be in gasoline, so there used to be a lot more lead in the air. And now it's primarily found in residential homes. So lead paint was used primarily in residential houses. And around 1950, that's when people started to realize this isn't safe. We should stop it. But it wasn't totally banned until 1978. We also find lead in soil a lot, so you'll start to see that a lot more because the soil threshold just got lowered immensely. So a lot more buildings are going to have lead soil hazards. So that's usually next to the exterior of a home. The farther away you get from a building, the less likely there is to be lead in the soil. Lead was in gasoline that was phased out in 1986, and household plumbing such as fixtures, lead solder, and connecting pipes were starting to be banned out in 1980s to about 2014. Any questions?
So how, 2014 wasn't very long ago.
No.
Do you think it was, let's just say in the 2000s, was it pretty much done away with, or we still see a lot of it, even as recently as?
It depends. That's why it's always good to do water tests in homes. So you guys can work with various labs. You can work with the state of Maine lab too, to do a water test, but we always recommend people do water tests every few years, but especially if a home has been vacant. So for example, when I bought my house, it had been vacant for a while. So we had a lot of issues pop up since it had been vacant.
Is lead one of the required elements of water testing, or?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
What I can do, I think I may have had you reach out. We have a toxicologist, Tom Simones, that he could give you guys or someone else in our department more of a talk on other things that could be found. So
Sure.
I'm not an expert in lead and water,
Okay.
whereas he is. He gets various calls about that. And then he could talk about other things that could be found in well water testing.
Okay.
So he answers all those questions. And that
Okay.
again would be a free training, Bill.
I am going to set that up.
Okay. And Tom answers questions all day long. So he'd be great. Any other questions? So I just want to highlight that out of all these, lead paint is still the primary source of lead poisoning. So lead paint is usually found in old windows, old doors, the original doors, trim, really any trim inside of an old house. Primarily the trim around windows, trim around doors, trim along the floors, the baseboards, upper level trim. And sometimes it's found on floors. Even if a floor has been sanded, it still may be leaded because lead paint soaks into the wood. It's very difficult to get rid of. It also is used a lot on stairs and railings, the balusters, little spindles going down, connecting the railing to the stairs themselves. Those are often leaded. Occasionally it was put in stain. And the thing about lead is it held up really well. So it was primarily used in places of high friction, high wear and tear, but it doesn't last over 100 years. And it also happens to be very poisonous. Most older homes, the exterior is lead paint. So the most part of a building on the exterior is usually lead paint. Any questions? I just pointed out these pictures are all lead paint and these are very bad. So when it starts to get the alligator skin, that's when you know you need to get some help. So lead dust is the primary way that children get lead poisoned. Lead dust comes from old paint. So when lead paint starts to chip or peel, flake, then it creates lead dust. So lead paint is not the top layer of paint that you see, most likely. It's usually many layers deep because it was put on a long, long time ago. When the paint is in good condition, the top layers of paint, then the lead paint's fine. But what we're saying is when it starts to wear and tear, or weather damage, water damage, or just in an area of friction, such as a tight fitting door opening, closing, or old window opening, closing, or walking across a leaded floor or stairs, that all creates lead dust, as well as renovations. Any questions? I forgot to bring up that it's sometimes used on walls. The tricky part is we can't go back and ask where it was used because lead paint was very expensive. Sometimes it wasn't used that much. Sometimes it was, depending on how much money someone had at the time. But that's why lead inspections are very good. So renovations, I really wanted to highlight this because this can create a lot of lead dust. And it's usually done by homeowners themselves living in the home. And lead dust is extremely difficult to clean up. We find it even 10 years after renovation has occurred. And lead dust, do you think on the picture on the right-hand side where it looks really nice, do you think that there would be any lead dust there?
Because of what you just said, I'm guessing yes.
There would probably be a whole lot of lead dust. Yeah, because there's no plastic, nothing to keep the renovation from spreading lead dust everywhere.
And you're probably going to get to this, but I'm guessing a homeowner, well, maybe I'll let you get to it, but are they allowed, they're not allowed to just do the renovations without taking the proper precautions?
They can.
Right?
They can.
They can.
If it's a private homeowner, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So do you see this tiny little bit of white? That's the amount of lead dust it takes to poison a child.
Thanks.
And lead dust is usually invisible. So it just takes a very, very small amount. So that's the number one way that children in Maine get lead poisoned. It's not by chewing on trim or picking at the walls, it's lead dust. So lead poisoning is very bad because studies have shown that it causes irreversible damage to children's bodies. It especially hurts their brains, so it's harder for them to learn. It changes how they learn. It changes their behavior. And usually we don't see side effects until a child is in school. So usually they're poisoned around ages 1 to maybe up until age 5 or so. And they look perfectly fine, they're acting fine, but we don't see the long-term damage until they're a little bit older. So that's why lead poisoning is so bad. And it will never go away. Any questions? So lead poisoning happens from various ways. So what we were talking, if like these bottom pictures, if you're walking across a leaded floor, that will create lead dust. If you have a tight fitting door or chipping or peeling paint, that will create lead dust. So occasionally when children are teething, they bite everything. I don't know if you guys have children, but they will just chomp on things, and especially things that are at their level, so especially windowsills. And so this is one of our pictures that the child was actually biting the windowsill. And the bad thing about lead paint is it's sweet. So if they bite it, then they're more likely to bite it again. So these are all the various ways that children can get poisoned. So especially lead dust, it settles on flat surfaces. And so if a child is touching the windowsills, even just touching it, and they put their fingers in their mouth, which little kids do all the time, then they're probably going to have lead poisoning. Or if they're hanging out on the floor with their toys, which they probably are, they touch the floor, there's a little bit of lead dust on it, but they put their fingers in their mouth, then they're going to have lead poisoning. Any questions? So children are identified with lead poisoning because they have a blood test. It should be children ages 1 and 2 years old have a blood test in Maine. And then it's recommended for children ages 3 to 5. There's a various questionnaire that pediatrician goes through with the family. And we know when a child is lead poisoned. We get all results for every single child in Maine that's tested for lead, whether they have lead poisoning or not. Any questions?
So you're just saying, when you say it's required, that it's required of doctors if they're seeing, I mean, presumably they're seeing the children. I mean,
yes.
So they're required to do it. Okay.
Yes, and that's changed. A few years ago, it used to just be children in Maine carry ages 1 and 2, but now it's required for every child ages 1 and 2. So this goes into what you were talking about a little bit, Bill. So let's say that we have a lead poisoned child, or if we have evidence of lead hazards. So evidence of lead hazards means we have a high home lead dust test kit, or a code officer, public health nurse is in a home or rental unit, and they see chipping or peeling paint, and they use a lead check, and they send us a picture, then we have evidence of lead hazards we can inspect. So if it's a rental unit, we must do the lead inspection. If we find lead hazards, so a lead hazard would be high amount of lead dust, lead paint that's in bad condition, chipping or peeling, or in a place of friction, wear and tear. If we have lead in the soil or lead in the water, those are the primary sources. Then we would issue a lead abatement order. And that, if we know that a building is being sold, then we try to put it in the deed. We're trying to put more in the deed, but we're just a little understaffed. And then we also have to inspect all the remaining units within that building within 30 days. And we rely on the owner to help us with inspect those additional units, not the tenants. So let's say we have evidence of lead hazard, so a high home lead dust test kit or a lead poisoned child in a private single family home. So the owner lives in the home and it has a 1 kitchen, that we count as a private single family home. Then we offer a lead inspection. Now we do have the discretion. We don't use it very much, but we do the discretion for single family private homes to issue a order to inspect as well as issue an order to abate lead hazards. We usually only use that if we have extenuating circumstances so that we don't think the children are safe there, or the family is not doing what they should to keep the children safe from lead hazards, or the child's level is not going down. So then we order a lead inspection. Any questions? So once we find lead hazards, on the left here, that's a notice of environmental lead hazards. That's posted on every building where that's a rental unit. We order relocation if we don't think it's safe for a child to be there. We don't do it very much. It's only in scenarios where it's very, very bad. And then we also order the removal of the lead hazards. So that means that we issue an abatement order. And that's when we try to post it in the Registry of Deeds. So that's where you guys are coming up, finding those a lot. Any questions? So these are our lead inspection reports. Have you all seen the lead inspection reports at all?
I don't think I've ever seen one.
Okay, so homeowners, landlords are very confused by these. So it tells them where all the lead paint is, if it's in good condition or bad condition. The order to abate lead hazards means they only need to hire a lead abatement contractor to address what we deemed a lead hazard. So it's usually on page 6 of the report, and we can do a whole nother training on this if you want. But this is usually what it looks like, that page. And then it has a whole table of the lead hazards that were found. So owners usually get confused. They think that they have to fix all the lead paint. They don't. They just have to fix what we deemed a lead hazard. The problem lies in there's still usually a lot of lead paint left. So they may go through, hire a lead abatement contractor. Oftentimes people think that all the lead is gone. It's usually not all gone. It's usually still there. And that intact lead paint can become a lead hazard at any time. This goes into, Bill, what you were asking. So with private homes, when we do a lead inspection, they don't have to hire anybody. They can if they want, but they don't have to. We recommend that they take the RRP course, which is that 1-day course. We'll get into that in a minute. Or if they do hire anyone, we tell them that they should hire a lead abatement contractor. But a lot of times people don't have the funds to hire anybody. So if you have a private home that you're selling and you find out there was a lead inspection, there's a good chance there's still lead hazards there that were never addressed. And it's probably worse than what the inspection originally found. Any questions?
It's good to know for like if you have a buyer buying a flip house. Because if it's potentially worse, that's something they need to know.
Yes. So I were them, I would pay for another lead inspection. And so what they could do is they could go in with that previous inspection report, and it would save them a little bit of money. So they would just need to do a visual to look at the existing lead paint, but they wouldn't have to pay for another full lead inspection, most likely, because a lot of the work was already done. Okay, so in order to abate lead hazards, getting into this a little bit. So this means, again, all the lead paint that is in bad condition, deteriorated, chipping, peeling, place of friction, needs to be abated, made lead safe for at least 20 years by a lead abatement contractor. We give the owner of the property, of the rental unit, a list of lead abatement contractors. Still, a lot of people get confused, but they have to use someone who's on that list. They can't just hire anybody. And they get an extension of time if they are showing progress. So they have to tell us that they are making an effort. They have to send it to us in writing via email, letter, fax, stating what they've done, and then we can give them an extension of time. And we try to work with people. So you can find out if a property has an existing lead abatement order by checking the registry of deeds, but I'd also call us too. So you can call us anytime about any property, and we'll tell you. So the deadline for the orders to abate, in the law, it states that that has to be abated within 30 days. It's very difficult because there's not that many abatement contractors, and it takes a long time to set up, usually, to find somebody. So as long as people are making progress and giving us updates, then we will grant them an extension of time. The lead abatement order can transfer to another owner. It happens a lot. So if someone can't afford to get it abated, then they usually sell it. And they just need to disclose the lead inspection reports and the lead abatement order. And I always welcome people to call me. How I usually explain it is, you could buy any old house in Maine and there's probably lead paint there. There's a good chance there's some lead hazards. The good thing about this property is it comes with the lead inspection report. Each unit, the report is worth about $1,000, and it tells you where all the lead is and where it isn't. And you know that's going to be fixed by a lead abatement contractor that's a very, very good contractor. Whereas you could buy any other home in Maine or rental unit, and it could be fixed by someone who's not as good contractor. And you'll know that this will be very safe for your tenants. And usually when I explain that to them, that they start to understand. And after the lead abatement is done, the owners receive a clearance documentation from us, and then they receive what are called Form Ms, stating that each of the units have been abated. And so they need to keep those for their records and then show those to any potential buyers. Even if it was abated 10 years ago, they still need to show that. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. Are you finding that there are enough qualified, certified contractors, or is there a shortage of those, or?
There's definitely more every year, but we definitely need more in Maine. There's also the cost of materials has skyrocketed recently, so that's a big hindrance, but we definitely need more contractors. And I also tell people to call. So for Southern Maine, they can call all over Maine. They don't have to just call contractors in Southern Maine. A lot of contractors up north will come down, or they already are coming down.
Okay. How long does it take roughly, and what does it cost to become a certified contractor?
The contractor, so they have to take the RRP course, which is a 1-day course. And then I think that's maybe $300. And then they have to take the abatement contractor course. That's 4 days. And I think that may be about $500, but don't quote me on that. And I can send you all the information after. And then they need to get licensed with the state of Maine. And then they're good to go to do the lead abatement.
Okay, so it's
So
the
we
state
do have, what?
Oh, is it the state that does that training, or like private companies?
It's private companies, but the state helps to oversee it. And then a lot of landlords actually do the lead abatement themselves. They get trained in it.
You had mentioned the testing, was worth like $1,000. That's when you're called in because a child has tested positive, and so you're doing the testing.
Yeah, or evidence of lead hazards. Every time there's a lead inspection report, lead risk assessment, that's generally worth about $1,000.
So does that mean it costs?
No, it's free.
From the state. That I'm saying if you're called in, but if a homeowner, they
would have to pay for it. Yes.
Yeah. And again, that's through the state, or?
No, I can give you a list of this too. That's where they can hire their own inspectors or risk assessors. The difference is there's a big difference in cost. So lead inspectors tell you where all the lead is and where it's not, but they don't tell you if it's a lead hazard or not. Whereas the lead risk assessor will tell you where all the lead is and where it isn't, as well if it's a lead hazard or not. So that costs more money usually. It also costs money just in general for the inspection or risk assessment, how big the property is. And then we also do lead dust sampling and lead and soil sampling throughout the, we do dust sampling throughout the house and lead and soil sampling. That's all extra for lead inspection reports. And ours are very detailed because we're trying to figure out how a child got lead poisoned or how to keep a child from getting lead poisoned in the first place. But
Right.
homeowners, I would definitely recommend all people buying a home that they pay to have at least a lead inspection done. And they can call our program with questions like, I'm not sure what I'm reading here, because the reports can be very confusing. We can help them read it.
Right. I think, and Josh can, I suspect he'll agree. I mean, we're not finding that people, buyers are paying for these, and maybe it's partly our fault for not, recommending it strongly enough that they do so. I mean, we have to push them, just to do, septic inspection sometime, or to do a full-blown water test, or,
Or do
wait
they
on.
do home inspections?
Oh, sure.
And so
I would say for
explain
the most part, but
it's not the home inspector. A lot of people think the home inspector does lead, but they don't. So maybe just explaining that to them.
yeah. No, I don't, like I said, I don't think that they think that. Like I said, I suspect a lot of it might be on us for not, recommending that strongly enough, that they bring in, a separate inspector to do that. So that's something for us to think about.
Well, maybe we have someone on our team that makes our tip sheets very eye appealing. Maybe I can work with her and you guys on creating a tip sheet for potential homeowners, what they should know.
Yeah, that would
guys
be
want-
helpful.
I think the general mindset with agents and homeowners with lead is if it's 1978 or older, you're going to find it in there somewhere anyway, but not really thinking about what the risk of the dust being on the property is. It's just, okay, it's there somewhere. As long as we paint over it, we're fine. And I think that's the mindset of a lot of agents too. So that's why most agents probably don't even think to test for it.
Yes. And I found the same thing when I was looking for a house too. All right. Are you ready to go on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So landlords' responsibilities for order to abate, they should not remove the posting. We will fine them up to $500 per day for this violation if they do that. They cannot re-rent any unit in the building until the lead abatement order is completed. So this means, let's say it's a 3-unit rental building. Unit A has lead hazards. Unit B and C have no lead hazards. If unit B becomes vacant, they can't re-rent it until the lead hazards are fixed in unit A. The whole building has to be without lead hazards to re-rent any vacant unit. A lot of people get confused on that. They can't evict because of lead. By all means, they can evict if there are other issues, but it can't be that a landlord finds out that their tenants got their child tested for lead and now there's lead hazards that are found. They can't say, I'm evicting you then. If we order relocation of the family because it's not safe for them to live there in terms of lead hazards, the landlord has to pay those relocation costs. So that means renting a moving van, U-Haul truck, anything like that. And the difference in rent, so let's say they're paying $1,000 right now and the new apartment is $1,200. They would have to pay that extra $200 until their primary property was abated. They would have to also pay security deposit, last month's rent, bunch of different stuff. And they would also have to look for the relocation unit. So the lead abatement order, again, it says it has to be within 30 days, but people can ask for an extension. And the extensions are usually granted if they are making progress. It has to be by a certified lead abatement contractor, which I'll send you this list afterwards, Bill. Many landlords, again, get trained and licensed to do it themselves, especially if they have multiple properties. It's a really good idea. And then they have to, they can sell the property with the lead abatement order. They just have to disclose it to the new owner. If they don't disclose it to the new owner, which sometimes happens, then we can fine that owner for not telling the new owner that there's a lead abatement order on the property. Any question?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm assuming it was me. My internet connection went frizzy for a minute, right as you were talking about the relocation costs. Who's responsible for that
The
again?
landlord.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's why it's really, and we'll go into this again in a minute, but that's why it's really good that if you can encourage people to do the inspection before they rent it out, and if lead hazards are found, to fix everything, so then they won't be in this boat.
Especially if a buyer's buying a multi-unit, like they don't
Yes.
want to inherit. So you said they can't, you know, they can't evict because of lead. But I mean, the people, especially if they have small children, they shouldn't be living there anymore. So
Well, they can.
okay.
There's numerous ways that, so we talk with families of lead poisoned children, or if there are evidence of hazards. And a lot of times a child's level starts to go down because the family knows, oh, that's where the child was getting lead poisoned, the windowsill, or they know a certain floor or something. Then that's the child's level starts to go down. But we only order relocation in instances where it's not safe. So let's say the floors are leaded. I had a case last year where the floors were leaded in all the children's bedrooms. The railings were all lead hazards. It was almost impossible to avoid any lead hazard in their apartment.
Now I thought you said earlier that like once it gets in the body, there's no cure, there's no way to get it out. But can the level go down if the exposure is limited? Okay.
The level can go down, and it usually does, but it doesn't mean that the child won't have lifelong side effects.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. On the same, so there's no, I mean, I think I know the answer, but just to clarify, so there is no responsibility whatsoever for the owner of a multi-unit to do testing unless asked by, if a tenant requests testing, then they have to do it, or how does that work?
My understanding, if the tenant requests testing, I think they should do it. But that's where a lot of people get really confused, and that's where it's good to do it before the tenants are even living in the unit. Because if lead hazards are found, then you're gonna have to, even if it's not found by us, then they should address them. And once you have the tenant in the unit, you have all the tenant's items. You're more likely to get them accidentally exposed to lead hazards, even adults, because unfortunately a lot of landlords, they don't understand that they need to hire at least an RRP contractor if there's no lead abatement owner. So all the time I have people, oh, my landlord came in, was sanding and scraping, and everybody was in the apartment. They didn't put up any plastic or anything. Everything is covered in probable lead dust. So even the adults are probably lead poisoned. So it's a good idea to do the inspections before tenants move in there, so you know exactly what is in the building.
Oh, I totally understand that. I'm just trying to clarify legally, the owner of a multi-unit, they're not required to do I mean, are they required to do testing if
No,
a tenant asks? No.
I
Only if
think
there's
so. I
proof.
would double check. On that, but I
Okay.
think so.
Okay. So, but if lead poisoning has been reported,
Then we have to inspect.
then the state steps in.
And that's where it's different, Bill. Once we step in, they have to hire a lead abatement contractor, which is much, much more expensive than an RRP contractor. Before we get involved, they can hire an RRP contractor, which is much less expensive.
Okay.
And we'll get
So
to that in a minute.
Okay, so they can't do it themselves once you step in.
No, they can't.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, unless they're a lead abatement contractor. But I recommend, if any landlord is going to disturb any paint in their building, fix anything, they need to be an RRP contractor. Because if they're found not being an RRP contractor, disturbing paint in their rental unit, they can be fined by the EPA.
Oh, wow.
So they definitely need to at least be RRP. So if lead hazards are found by the owner and the tenant before we get involved, like I always tell tenants or landlords, if you see chipping or peeling paint, hire an RRP contractor. You don't have to wait for us to get involved. Again, once we get involved, it's going to be a lot more expensive.
So what does RRP stand for again?
That's repair, renovate, paint. So
Okay.
this is that. So RRP on your right. So that's regulated by the US EPA. It means renovations, repair, painting. So anytime paint is disturbed in a rental unit built before 1978, it should be done by an RRP contractor. There are many, many RRP contractors in Maine. I'll send you a list of RRP contractors. And especially down in southern Maine, you have quite a lot. And so they know how to do a renovation in a lead safe way. They know how to test for lead paint. They don't do the testing that like our lead inspectors do, but they use what's called a lead check. And to be an RRP contractor, it's just a one-day course and it's good for 5 years. So all landlords, I recommend if they're going to do any paint, if any removing of paint in their building, disturbing a paint, they need to take this course. And I'll send you the website for the contractors. And if EPA finds out that you're doing work in a rental unit and you're not RRP, then they will fine you.
Now, does the same go for single family homes or no?
No.
Okay.
And that's where with single family homes, there could be a lot of lead hazards that no one knows about because
Sure.
a lot of homeowners, they don't know that there's lead paint in the unit. They may not have the money to hire a contractor. And they don't know how to clean up the probable lead dust. And a lot of like I mentioned before, a lot of times we have cases where they're living with the renovation. They're doing a lot of things they shouldn't do. And a lot of times children are even helping with the renovations. So whereas abatement on the left-hand side, that's overseen by the state of Maine Department of Environmental Protection. I'll send you the contact information for them. So lead abatement permanently addresses lead hazards. Permanent in this terms means lead safe for 20 years. So abatement can mean enclosure, encapsulation, or removal. It really depends on the component. So for example, a leaded floor, it's usually best just to spray paint the words lead paint and put a subfloor down and new flooring. If it's a door, it's usually best to remove it. Stairs are usually enclosed. Windows are usually removed. Trim, usually they encapsulate that. So it really depends on the lead hazards, what's done. And the lead abatement contractor, they are trained in how to properly address the lead hazards, and they work with the Department of Environmental Protection on that. And after the lead abatement is done, and during the lead abatement, even before it happens, the lead abatement contractor has to create an occupancy safety plan for how to actually keep the tenant safe or the homeowner safe during the abatement, and that has to be submitted to the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And then after the abatement occurs, a lead inspector comes back in to make sure that everything was done, so third party, and they also take lead dust sampling. So they test to see if the lead dust levels are all low throughout the building. And we will fine the owner if they're supposed to use a lead abatement contractor and they don't, then we will fine them up to $500 per day for that violation. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So there is money available. This is where I highly recommend you guys send people. So let's say that they don't have money to do a lead inspection when they first buy the home. If they qualify for one of these grants, they'll do a free lead inspection for the family. And then they will give them up to $30,000 for a single family home to make it lead safe. And then it has up to $15,000 per unit for rental units too. And it's not based on the landlord's income, it's based on the tenant's income.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's based off of average median income. I think it's 80% of average median income, which for down in your area is quite high. So a lot of people actually qualify. But again, this does not mean lead free. There's probably still lead paint there. Any questions?
It's simply abating to a safe level, or?
So it means that the lead hazards that are found during the lead inspection, that those are going to be made lead safe for at least 20 years.
Okay.
But there still may be a lot of lead paint there that at the time was intact, but it could become a hazard at any time, even the next day. If something, I mean, if you have trim that's leaded and something, you're moving furniture around, something hits it, then that would be a lead hazard.
Okay.
But I definitely recommend sending people to these grants because there's money available and they need to hand them out, the money. So this is what you were getting into a little bit, Bill. So the EPA lead disclosure, so that's the 10-day period for lead inspection, lead risk assessment before the property is purchased. And that's where the person selling the property should disclose everything that they have in regards to lead inspections, risk assessment, order to abate, compliance, all that stuff. What a lot of people get confused about is even if they have the lead disclosure, it doesn't mean that we can't get involved in the future. And it doesn't mean that they won't have a potential lead abatement order. So unfortunately, I have some properties that they've had numerous lead abatement orders, but they still have a lot of intact lead paint left in their property. So if that's not maintained, then if I have another lead poisoned child or evidence of lead hazards, then I have to go back in. And if I find lead hazards again, then I'm going to issue another order to abate. Does that make sense? I know this is a lot.
It is a lot, but it makes sense.
We can always do another training in a few months. It's okay. Again, I've been doing this 7 years and I'm still learning stuff. How are
I'm
you
just
doing?
having everybody call you, so.
That's fine. How are you doing, Josh?
Doing good. Doing
Okay.
good.
So what can you all do? So much. So you don't have to be experts. You can just refer people to us. So especially if someone has children under 6 years old or if they're pregnant, you can refer them to us. We have free, so for people who can't afford a lead inspection, we have free home lead dust test kits on our website. So if they have a child under 6 or they're pregnant, they can do a lead dust test kit and then we'll provide them technical assistance. Or if it's really high, then we'll offer them a free lead inspection. Right now I have a family that they're pregnant. They just bought a really, really old home. There's chipping paint everywhere. We're doing a free lead inspection for them because our goal is to keep that future child from getting lead poisoned. So I know you said some people are managing properties bills. That's why I put this in there. So I'd encourage your clients of rental units, as well as single family homeowners and property managers to figure out if there's lead paint in their building or units, maintain the paint. So for areas where it's chipping or peeling and it's not a friction or impact surface, so just trim or walls, anything where it's not a tight fit and it like a window or a door or floor, they can just paint it. No sanding or scraping, just touch up painting. And that will help to stabilize the paint. If they sand or scrape and it's lead, then they're making so many more lead hazards than they already had. And they can also poison themselves. Adults can get lead poisoned. It just has different side effects in children. They can visually inspect their units regularly, and I'll send you some tip sheets on this, Bill. So they can go through their units. I usually recommend every 3 months or so and just visually look for any chipping or peeling paint. If they see chipping or peeling paint, touch up paint it. That's all they need to do. They can also put in tenants' leases that if the tenants notice chipping or peeling paint, they need to let the landlord know right away. And then the landlord can address it before it gets to be worse. Again, they can apply to the grants to proactively do it before there's a lead poisoned child or before we get involved. The good thing about that is if there's a vacant unit, they can re-rent it. Whereas once there's an abatement order, they can't re-rent it. And again, before we get involved, they can hire an RRP contractor to address any lead hazards, or they can get trained themselves. I have someone right now that he's buying a unit that has a lead abatement order, and he's just going to gut the whole building. He's a lead abatement contractor, but he's just going to take everything that's leaded out, which he definitely can do if he wants, because he doesn't want us to ever get involved again. That just costs a lot more money. Any questions?
So you mentioned you have free test kits on your website. So that's just for dust use. Is that just for dust versus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are
that's
there,
better than nothing.
right? Are there test kits? I mean, I know for some things, like there's test kits at Lowe's or Home Depot. Are those reliable, or is that not
It
something?
depends on, and this is where it'd be good for someone to call us with questions, because a lot of times they use the wrong test kit. So if you're actually trying to determine if something is leaded, you don't want to use a dust test kit. You want to use a lead check.
Okay.
Or something similar to that. And the bad thing about the lead check is to test the component or whatever it is for lead. If it's leaded, then you make it a hazard. So let's say it's a windowsill. You have to test through all the layers of paint. And so once you've done that, that means it's a lead hazard. So you really only want to test for lead paint if it's already a hazard, or if you're going to be renovating it. So if you're going to be pulling out a window, before you do that, you want to test the window for lead paint. Or if you're going to be pulling out a door, you want to test the door for lead paint, because you want to do that so you know I have to take extra precaution to not poison myself and other people.
Okay.
Because it's leaded. The lead dust test kits are good just to know, is there lead paint? Is there lead dust here? Like, it could be a gorgeous 1850s home. Everything's intact, but the family wants to know if there's lead dust hazards there, then that's where the lead dust test kit would be really good. If they don't have money to do a full lead inspection or risk assessment, they could at least do that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Any questions, Josh?
Nope.
There's not going to be a quiz. Don't worry.
Thank God.
So this is my contact information. You guys can contact me anytime. We have a lot of people on staff. And I definitely would recommend you guys reach out to Biddeford, their lead grant, because they have money just for Biddeford that they're trying to hand out. And so you could get to know that person there. I think her name is Gail. And then we have the state of Maine Housing Authority has funding for Southern Maine for lead abatement, as well as Cumberland County. So I'll send you Cumberland County's information too, because I didn't know you did Cumberland County.
Awesome. Thank you.
So Cumberland County has a whole pot of money too for lead abatement. Any questions?
I think you hit on all the high points.
Yep.
And anybody afterwards, they can contact me anytime with anything. There's no wrong question, okay?
All right. Awesome, Dana. Thank you so much for your
No
time.
problem.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and enjoy the nice weather today.
You too.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
All
Thank
right,
you, Dana.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.